Good morning. Committee on Parole's call to today is Monday, February 3rd, 2025.
Yes.
The time is 9:00 a.m. My name is Cheryl Renatza, serving as chairman of today's parole panel. We are a 5-member panel today. Seated to my far left is Mr. Chucky Tillis. To my immediate left, Mrs. Carolyn Stapleton. To my immediate right is Mrs. Jerry Ledoux. And to my far right is Mr. Pete Freeman. We are at DOC headquarters in Baton Rouge. I'd like the staff here at headquarters to please introduce yourself for the record.
Desmond Thompson. Parole Williams.
We also have Whitney Troxclair, Ms. Gail Garian, and Francis Abbott with us. Our first remote location is at Raymond Laborde Correctional Center. Would you, the staff, warden, and your staff, please introduce yourself for the record?
Deputy Warden Stephen Bordelon.
Deputy Warden Nikki Shinbear.
Raven Heath classification.
Melissa Joshua, records.
All right, thank you. Thanks for accommodating us this morning. And our first case there is Mr. Wilkins. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, ma'am.
Would you introduce yourself for the record?
My name is Robert Wilkins.
What's your DOC number?
My DLC number is 581134. Date of birth, September the 9th, 1976.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkins. Let me, before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the folks who have joined us by Zoom. We have here in support your brother, Raymond Wilkins. He'll be speaking on your behalf at the appropriate time. In opposition, joining us by Zoom from the Calcasieu District Attorney's Office, we have Natalie Connor, Harry Fontenot, and Jacob Johnson, the Assistant District Attorney. Ms. Fontenot and Mr. Johnson will be speaking at the appropriate time. Also joining us is Harry Fontenot, Sherry Willis and Julia Fontenot. And at the appropriate time, we'll call on them for their remarks. So, Mr. Wilkins, let me just put some identifying information into the record, sir. You're classified as a first felony offender. You're currently serving a 62-year sentence. You were sentenced in Calcasieu Parish, May the 1914. Possession of marijuana, you received a 12-year sentence. Possession of cocaine, a 12-year sentence. And manslaughter, a 40-year sentence. So your total sentence is 52 years. You have a parole eligibility date, which was September 22nd, 2024, and your good time release date is September 28th, 2037. Is that information correct, sir?
That is correct, ma'am.
Okay. So, Mr. Wilkins, before we get started with our interview, we'd like for you to tell us what led you to prison, why are you in jail, and why do you think we should vote favorably for you today for parole?
Well, what led me to prison started long before I actually got here. It was a lifelong addiction to alcohol and drugs, namely cocaine. I've made a lot of bad decisions on my way to get here, which ultimately took an innocent man's life. It's something I still struggle with, and a lot of people, I'm sure, wouldn't believe it. I do bear that guilt and that responsibility on me every day, and it will be with me for the rest of my life. There's a lot of things I've had to look at personally, a lot of things I had to admit to myself, a lot of things that I had to work on dealing with my issues. A continuous effort to acknowledge my faults, my shortcomings. I understand what I've done, and I take full responsibility for them. I understand the precious life that I robbed from individuals because of my decisions and because of my selfishness. There's nothing I could ever say or do to replace that precious piece that I took from somebody. but I'm here to let him know that I am sorry. I'm sorry for what I've done. I did not have to do it. And everyone is suffering because of my actions. Again, that guilt and that responsibility will lie on me for the rest of my life.
All right. So why do you think we ought to vote favorably for you today?
If we talk about it in terms of rehabilitation and never being in this situation again, that's one thing. But like I said, there's issues that I've had to deal with. There's stuff that I've had to admit, stuff I've had to work on, and stuff I've continuously strive to work on. It's about going forward and never returning backwards. And I'd like to think that I've shown a valiant effort in that department. I'll always be an alcoholic and drug addict. That'll never go away. That is a struggle that I've had since I was 10 years old. It's something I will struggle with for the rest of my life. But I do have right over 10 years of sobriety. And that is something I could say I have never had in my life.
Okay, thank you. Warden Wardlaw, is there anything you can tell us about Mr. Wilkins?
Oh, yes, ma'am, I sure can. Yeah. I'll speak about what Robert's done since he's been here. You know, he's a Mint 2 trustee. He works in maintenance as a plumber, does an exceptional job with that, works real hard and is always willing to work. And also he serves as our inmate counsel substitute for our disciplinary procedures here. So he floats between the two of them, and he's very active with the law library and stuff, and helps out a whole lot right there. He since he's been here, he's taken a lot of good classes that he was, definitely needs to have. He's thinking for a change, Cajun Rage. He's completed the victim impact class. Looking at it, I did see that, he still needs to get that living in balance phase 2. And we can definitely see about getting him into those, finish up that class as well. He's done pre-release. And I do want to point out, since he's been incarcerated here, he has no disciplinary history at all. So that's really impressive as well. Speaking, like I said again, what he's done here, he's definitely applied himself and done everything he possibly can while he's here. We had a good interview. I was glad that he brought up about his substance abuse problem and realizing that he's always going to be an addict. So I would definitely recommend that he continue that if he was granted parole as well. And he does seem to have a good support system and a good plan as far as whenever he does eventually ever get released. So that's good to hear and see as well.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your input. We appreciate it.
Yes.
Now we'd like to hear from the opposition. And Mr. Johnson, I'll let you decide who would like to speak first, and we'll just hear from them in the order that you choose.
Yes, ma'am. If I could, I would like to defer to the victim's family. They are in the conference room at the DA's office first. You'll see the name N. Connor. That's for Natalie Connor. She works with my office. And if the family could speak first, I would appreciate that. And I would prefer to go after them, and they've had their chance to say their piece. So Natalie, if we could unmute, please. And I can't see all who from the family is there. I do see Mr. Harry Fontenot, recognize him on the screen. And so Mr. Fontenot, if you would like to speak, I would defer to you. And then if we could go kind of in order with whoever would like to present.
Okay, thank you. My name's Harry Fontenot. I was Tony's big brother. And Mr. Wilkins said he will always be an addict, an alcoholic. He'll always be a murderer. This was a death penalty case, if you read my letter, and we let it go down to second degree. Went to trial one, wasn't unanimous, because once they got to 10, they quit counting. So out of our compassion, we let him plead to a manslaughter, and we let him plead to the drugs, and he got a set time to serve. That's better than being dead or life in jail. So that was our charity to him, where he never showed us any. The contract should be in front of you. We didn't know that the DA signed, scratched out life without parole. But in the next paragraph, it says this thing intends for him to serve 52 years. If he doesn't serve 52 years, I'd like to have the contract voided because he didn't want to adhere to it, and we want to go to trial again. You do not know what this has done to our family. Mama had a heart attack, she could tell you about. It's suffering every day. Daddy died a broken man. He's all doing good, yeah. But Tony never had the chance to finish doing good. He had his degree. He was working his way up. He did what I said in the letter. He wasn't going to start a family until he had it paid off. Wilkins is a drug dealer. He lured him to the bayou. My brother was in shorts, no shoes, nothing. Lured him to the bayou, got in his truck and slit his throat. There was blood from the crime scene all the way to the bridge. His truck was filled up with blood. He never gave my brother one thought of charity. And my mother and father gave him charity when they let him plead straight up to a manslaughter consecutive with the drugs. And in that contract, it says, with this contract, he is supposed to serve 52 years. Now we're going to be victimized again if you don't uphold that contract. If you find the contract void it. Let's go back to trial. That's all I can say. You see my letter. My sister sitting here. It ruined her life, ruined my life, and my mom and dad. And I'll let my sister go now if she wants to talk.
My name is Cheryl Willis. Tony was my little brother, and he did not deserve this. Robert Wilkins cut his throat and left him to die on the side of the road like an animal. And my family has suffered every day. The whole time we went to court for years, Wilkins sit up there with a smirk on his face while his lawyers massaged him every day. And we got to see that. This man has no remorse. He can sit up there all beefed up and say he does. He's an addict and he will be an addict. Please, for the sake of my family, I am begging you to keep him behind bars where he needs to be. Thank you very much for listening to me.
And next we have Miss Julia Fontenot. Good morning.
Yes. I'm Julia Fontenot, mother of the victim who was murdered. I'm here to oppose parole for Robert Wilkins. My son has went over a lot of the things that I was going to talk about, but I agree with everything he said, so I don't need to repeat it, but I just want to tell you, plead with you, I implore you, please do not give him parole. He does not deserve it. He assassinated my son. He assassinated his character in court without any proof of anything he was stating. He took something away from us that's so precious to us, and nobody can give it back to us. And every day, I still, when I hear a car drive up in my driveway, I look out there thinking, hoping it would be Tony. And it's been going on all these years and it won't go away. It doesn't. People say get over and have closure. The only closure I'll have is when I'm in my grave with my son. And I'm not trying to be a smart aleck or anything like that, but I think if Wilkins get paroled, it should only be on the day that my son can be paroled from his grave, then give Wilkins parole. We were misled on the thing like my son talked about, so I won't go into that, but I'm going to close this and I respectfully implore you, I beg you, I plead with you, keep that monster where he's at behind bars, because then other people will still be safe. And I thank you for listening to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Fontenot. We do appreciate you and your family sharing your comments with us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes, Madam Chair and members, as you laid out earlier, Mr. Wilkins is convicted by a plea of manslaughter, possession with intent to distribute cocaine, possession with intent to distribute marijuana. I don't want anyone to be under the impression, and I know that you guys have millions of pages of documents at all times, that Mr. Wilkins is here because he's an addict. Mr. Wilkins was, in fact, while he is technically a first offender, was in fact, by his own admission, a significant drug dealer in our community, dealing many harmful substances, profiting off of poison, profiting off of other people who are addicts. I am glad to hear Mr. Wilkins say today that Tony Fontenot was an innocent person and that there was no excuse for what he did. I appreciate him saying that today. It was only about 10 years ago that Mr. Wilkins stopped putting up the facade that he was scared of Tony Fontenot and that he acted in self-defense. For a decade through the courts, he drug Mr. Fontenot through the mud over and over, repeating that he was scared, that it was a justifiable homicide. That's starting from the day he was arrested all the way through 2014 when he finally admitted his guilt. The Fontenot family did show a great deal of mercy, endorsing a plea for something less than second-degree murder. Mr. Wilkins was originally tried and convicted of second-degree murder. That matter was overturned on appeal. It was sent back for a new trial after a number of delays, a lot of wrangling. The matter was set to finally proceed to trial, and on that day, Mr. Wilkins requested and the family agreed to allow him to plead to 40 years for manslaughter, plus an additional 12 years to run consecutively for the 2 possession with intent convictions. And in that contract specifically, it's on page 5 or 6. I'll pull it up from my materials here, but it outlines that it was the design of the parties that the defendant serve the entirety of his term at hard labor with the Louisiana Department of Corrections, the entirety of his 52 years at hard labor with the Department of Corrections. I would then reference Judge Savoy in his trial transcript at his sentencing. Judge Savoy now and at that time was certainly a very experienced judge, was someone who I would say was a pretty down the middle judge, certainly not always with the state, not always with the defense. He's now a retired Court of Appeal judge, but very experienced, and he dealt with this matter, and he opined, and which I think is appropriate, that it was his opinion that Mr. Wilkins, given that he knew the facts of the case, he had overseen all of this wrangling, serve each day of those 52 years. And in fact, he made a remark that he didn't think that was quite enough, that he thought a life sentence would be most appropriate. Again, the Fontenot family provided a great deal of mercy to Mr. Wilkins for something less than life without parole. And that's because they were under the belief, understandably, that when someone signs a contract, that their own intention, the defendant's own intention, be to serve the full term of that 52 years, that ought to mean something. And we understand that there are good time laws and things like that. But here we are, a mere 10 years after the defendant accepted guilt, after 10 years of denying that he had any guilt in this matter, asking for your release. We don't believe that 20 years on a 52-year sentence is nearly appropriate. And so we would just say that we would beg of you to vote disfavorably. 20 years here for this particular killing is not significant enough. the family's been through one trial in which their loved one was just dragged through the mud quite cruelly. We're on the verge of another. They agreed to this plea with a good faith understanding of what 52 years looks like, even if there's some good time credits involved. Look, Mr. Fontenot is an accomplished lawyer. He's in fact the head of our public defender's office in Calcasieu Parish, so he understands the metrics that go into good time and all of those kinds of things. And what no one should have to expect is a 20-year sentence being the result of a 52-year sentence, when 40 of that is especially for manslaughter. I would say in this case that mercy to the guilty is in fact cruelty to the victims. I would say as a practicing prosecutor, when one is dealing with murder cases, or one is dealing with something else like a first-degree rape that has a life sentence, and you're trying to figure out if there's a reason for a plea, things like the 20-year rule can provide a moral hazard and can provide real confusion when you're talking with victims and survivors' families of what something like this looks like. In fact, I'm wrestling with that today. And so I would ask that you vote disfavorably on parole. I'm glad to hear Mr. Wilkins is doing well in prison. However, when he was out in our community, he was dealing drugs, he was causing harm, and he needlessly killed Tony Fontenot. I'm glad he's admitted that now that Mr. Fontenot was innocent. That should have not taken nearly as long as it did, but we would certainly very strongly oppose any parole release in this particular case. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Appreciate the DA's participation. All right, Mr. Wilkins, your case has been assigned to me, so I'm going to take the lead on the interview, and I do have a few questions. So we've already established through this process you've served 20 years. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And how old are you, sir?
I am 48 years old.
And you do have a good time date, which I think we said in the beginning, September 28, 2037. You mentioned that you took victim awareness or victim impact. I believe you have training in that regard. Tell us, what did you get out of that class?
That was a good class. That was an eye opener. That was actually putting yourself in someone's position. We had a facilitator who shared her personal story of loss, and it was gut wrenching. It really was. It was an eye opener, and it just kind of it was a self-reflection of how someone else is affected by your personal actions. So victim's impact was another eye opener as to the hurt that I've caused because of my actions.
And we've heard many times this morning from those who spoke in opposition about your plea agreement and your contract that you made with the victim's family and the district attorney's office. How do you feel about that now?
Well, as I know and the district attorney did speak about it, there is certain laws that would prevent a flat time because I am a first offender. This issue had been brought back to the court, and the court properly denied that a flat time for this would be improper, and it was also held up by the Third Circuit Court of Appeal. There's just so much I don't want to say. I really want to be respectful. It is about hearing their voice today and acknowledging my guilt for what I've done. I believe it's fitting for the position I'm in.
All right, I won't probe any further then. So when I look at your record, I agree, I'm really impressed with your zero disciplinary reports. How did you manage that in 20 years? We don't get to pick that.
That was part of the self-reflection. The shame that I felt. It's a moment of clarity. The shame that I've actually felt for the things I've done, the people that I've hurt, not just for this reason here. A lot of people in my life that I hurt. It was because of my selfishness. So that's a big motivator. The guilt and the shame is a big motivator for change.
Okay. And I noticed, I think I saw in the record, your job is in maintenance right now, but you were attending Ashland University and you quit. Why did you quit?
Yes, ma'am. I lost someone very special to me, and I never recovered from that. And it took the wind out of my sails. It was a devastating loss to me, and that was the reason for that. It wasn't academic or any other than losing someone.
Okay. I don't see that I have any other questions. Let me just tell you, though, that you do have, in addition to the opposition we've heard this morning, you do have opposition from law enforcement, strong opposition to any early release for you this morning. So you need to be aware of that. I don't have any other questions. My colleagues have any questions? I don't see any other questions, Mr. Wilkins. So I think we should be prepared to vote. But first, I want to hear from your brother. I see Raymond, are you on the line with us?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Sir, tell us what you'd like us to know about your brother.
First, I would like to extend my deepest condolences to the Fontenot family for their loss and the pain that my family has caused them. But my brother he is the picture of what the system was designed for, to reform those who offend out in the real world and to teach them. He's taken the time and the effort, put in great effort to learn new behaviors and new ways of thinking and acting so he could be a productive member of society if he ever got a chance to be released. And he's the picture perfect ideal candidate of what reform is. He's done everything that it was asked of him, and he probed even further to find out what more he could do to be a better person before his release date. And he's expressed to me many a times the routes that he wanted to take when he got out, such as joining a local Narcotics Anonymous association so he can spread his story to those to hear it, so maybe he can stop someone from being in the same position that he was. My brother is not anywhere near the person today that he was when he went in. He's the man that he should have been before his issues with the drugs and alcohol. He's the man that we all knew he could be today.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Wilkins. We appreciate you taking the time to speak with us this morning.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Wilkins, I think that we are prepared to vote. I'll be voting first since your case was assigned to me. It's a difficult case. I think you've done very well in prison in the environment that you're in. I see you've kind of moved around a bit and you've done well. You say you've been sober for 10 years. Congratulations on that. I still am really impressed with the fact that you haven't had any write-ups in spite of the different places you've been, because I know that's very difficult to do. I agree with Warden that you need to do the living in balance too. However, you know, and I think you still need to pursue that. When I look at the totality of the record, the contract that you signed in 2014, and listening to the district attorney this morning and the victim's family, I agree that 20 years is insufficient based on agreement you made with the victims in the state of Louisiana. So for those reasons, my vote today is going to be to deny your parole. Mr. Tillis?
I commend you on your service that you've done there in changing your life. And today's vote for me is going to be the same. I concur with Ms. Renata.
Mrs. Stapleton?
I concur with Ms. Renaud. I believe that you need to adhere to the plea agreement that you made of 52 years.
Mrs. Ledoux?
I appreciate Mr. Johnson's excellent discourse on the case and how it panned out on early stages. I think you're a different person today than when you came in, but my vote is also to deny based on the length of time served.
Mr. Freeman?
And I concur for the same reason.
All right, Mr. Wilkins, keep on the path you're going. I think you're on the right track, but today your parole's been denied, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Board along, that concludes our business at your facility this morning. We're going to sign off at 9:31. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Renata.
All right, good morning. Committee on Parole is reconvening. We're now at Rayburn Correctional Center. It's 9:35 a.m. on Monday, February 3rd, 2025. Good morning, Warden. Would you and your staff introduce yourself for the record?
Yes, ma'am. Warden Travis Day.
Kristen Herbert, records.
Tracy Taylor, classifications.
Good morning, and we have Mr. Anderson. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, ma'am.
Would you introduce yourself for the record?
Yes, ma'am. Stanley Anderson, 110504.
All right, Mr. Anderson, let me acknowledge some folks we have with us here today. We have folks from the First 72, Miss Mia Lowy, who will be speaking at the appropriate time. We'll call on her to do so. In opposition, we have a representative from the District Attorney's Office in Jefferson Parish, and we'll call on him at the appropriate time also. First, Mr. Anderson, I'm going to read some identifying information into the record. Mr. Anderson, you're classified as a second felony offender. You're currently serving a 30-year sentence as a habitual offender. You were sentenced in July of 1998 for attempted first-degree murder. You have a parole eligibility date, which is August 1st, 2021, and you have a good time date, September 11, 2027. Does all that sound accurate to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Mr. Anderson, before we hear from everybody who wants to speak and we do our interview with you, we'd like for you to tell us what led you to jail? Why are you in jail? And why do you think that this panel should vote favorably for you today, to vote in your favor?
Yes, ma'am. Night of the crime, it was a traffic stop, me and the officer. When he pulled me over, all the officer was doing was his job. I'm the one that got combated with the officer. Right after he went to ask me my name and called in, my license plate. But one thing led to another, and we got up into a physical altercation. And as I was breaking away, we both shot at each other simultaneously. I'm running away in fear. But they was totally my fault because I'm the one started everything with the officer. The officer just was doing his job. But as I go through my classes and all that, I understand why I did the things that I was doing. I didn't know I had anger issues and all that at the time. I'm going through life having all sorts of problems, not really knowing myself. For me, going through these anger management classes and that type of stuff just opened my eyes to a lot of things in my life in the past. Like the last class I just took, the CERT or substance abuse class, they say, well, 92% of the criminals that commit crimes, they be on some type of mind-altering drug. And that right there had me thinking in my past time of getting in trouble. Every time I got in trouble, I was under the influence. And I was glad I took that class. That opened my eyes. Ma'am?
I'm glad you took it too. Why
Yes,
do you
ma'am.
think we ought to vote for you today? Why do you think so?
Ma'am, I can't hear you.
Why do you think we ought to vote to grant your parole today?
I feel that right now I'm the best version of myself. I'm not the person I was when I come in. I'm just not. A lot of things I've done, I know now that I was wrong. I was just doing the wrong thing, following the wrong people, being around the wrong crowd and stuff like that. But since I've been incarcerated, I did the best that I could to rehabilitate myself. Looking forward just to try to do the right thing and make the right decision for my future. Ma'am?
All right. Well, thank you, sir. We would like to hear from Warden Day now. Warden, what can you tell us about Mr. Anderson?
Yes, ma'am. Stanley's been at RCC since 2008. He's a healthcare orderly, and he's been in there since 2009 in the infirmary, assisting with the patients in there and the nursing staff. As far as Stanley's character, always very nice and really have no issues with him. He's always very respectful to staff when I'm around. So looking at his disciplinary history, he does have a property destruction in 2017 where he was tying some extra weight on a weight bar, and he got an infraction for that. And had another contraband where he had some extra items in his locker and under his bed. But you know, like I said, he works in the infirmary and does a good job in there.
Okay, thank you, thank you. We'd like to hear now from Miss Mia Lowy, please, with the first 72.
Good morning. Thank you so much to the board for giving me the opportunity to speak today in support of Mr. Stanley Anderson. My name is Mia Lowy, and I'm the Director of Client Services at the First 72 Plus. We are a reentry organization based in New Orleans, working to stop the cycle of incarceration by providing adequate support to those returning home from prison. We've been working with Mr. Anderson for a bit, since last April, I believe, to create a solid reentry plan for if he is released. Mr. Anderson interviewed and was accepted into our transitional housing program. So this program grants him 90 days to live in our transitional house free of charge, while he works intensively with his assigned case manager to gain employment, open up a bank account, meet all of these milestones, so that way when the 3 months is over, we are able to send him off into the world as an independent person, living, working, and having stable housing. So the case manager will provide Mr. Anderson with employment support, will help him create a resume, connect him with any job training programs he's interested in, apply for jobs with fair chance employers. We're actually opening up our cooking school in the coming months. And during his incarceration, Mr. Anderson has obtained his GED and completed an immense amount of programming. He expressed interest in attending our culinary school. So we believe that this program will provide him with the knowledge and skills to obtain a job in the restaurant industry for completion. Mr. Anderson will work with our economic empowerment team to open a bank account, create a budget, and begin saving to afford that apartment after his 90-day stay has been completed. Our public benefits clinic will help Mr. Anderson apply for food stamps, Medicaid, SSI if needed. We will help him obtain any missing I-9 documentation, such as a birth certificate, a state ID, or a social security card. Mr. Anderson will be set up with an appointment at the FIT clinic, that stands for the Formerly Incarcerated Transition Clinic. So that will get him in with a primary care physician to get a checkup and any prescriptions renewed that he may have been taking during his incarceration. His mental health and substance use has already been addressed. He's completed an assessment with CADA. So he has already been input into their system, and he will be completing counseling with them upon returning home. We have a few social support groups as well. We have a 9 Steps to Staying Free class, which is a weekly peer mentorship class for formerly incarcerated people, supporting each other through the barriers of transitioning back into society. It addresses a lot of the same topics that classes, while they are incarcerated, do. So things like victim awareness, mental health, responding versus reacting. We have a family reunification program. Mr. Anderson is really eager to return to the city and meet his 3 grandchildren for the first time, as well as reconnect with his 3 sons. This program helps mend any familial relationships that are fractured due to a loved one's incarceration. Mr. Anderson will also be enrolled in our 5-day life skills class, which will help him readjust to living in New Orleans. These classes cover navigating public transportation, learning any renamed streets, answering the conviction question during a job interview, and setting attainable goals for the first year post-incarceration. So our team is really, really eager to welcome Mr. Anderson home and support him through this transition. He has one of the brightest spirits and best attitudes that I have ever had the pleasure to interact with. And I believe that he will really, really succeed and blossom when he comes home. So thank you so much for your time and consideration, and I hope that you will take my words into account today.
Thank you. All right, could we hear from the DA's office, please?
Good morning, Randall Meyer, Assistant DA, Jefferson Parish. And we're opposed to Mr. Anderson's request for parole. Looking at his criminal history, he had a prior first-degree murder that he pled to manslaughter and was incarcerated. Has a number of resisting and battery on battery offenses. And in this particular offense, he struck the officer and resisted arrest by flight. Then he pointed his weapon at the officer and discharged the weapon, shot at the officer. That's completely unacceptable. Looking at what he's done since he's been incarcerated, I find his programming is pretty limited. He took anger management back in 14 and 15. He took 100 hours. Then he's had living in balance in 2016 and 17 and thinking for a change in 22. He's had no victim related programs. That's very concerning. Looking at his certificates, he got a certificate in 23 for some 8-week course in self-discovery, self-motivation, and positive affirmations. And then 2024, he received a certificate for the Trauma Healing Institute. I still feel there's more programming that he needs to do prior to him being released, particularly victim accountability and other victim courses that he could have. And since the last hearing in 2022, all he's had was thinking for a change, which was in December of 22. He completed that, and the certificates I mentioned. So for those reasons, we're opposed to his request.
Thank you. We appreciate your input. Mr. Anderson, your case has been assigned to Mrs. Ledoux. Would you answer her questions, please?
Good morning, Mr. Anderson.
Good morning.
Before I start asking you questions, I'm curious about something. Warden, do you have a classification person and they're available to you? I've got a question about his credits for programming. On the master prison record, it says 75 days. And reviewing the different programming, we have a copy of his program completions, and there are many, many hours that have not been attributed, it looks like.
Yes, ma'am. He's a habitual offender, and habitual offenders were not eligible to receive credits until 11/1/17. And it looks like he completed most of his classes before 11/1/17. I was actually just talking about this before, and I wanted to check it when I get back to my office and make sure that all of them that were supposed to be credited are credited. But I do see he would not have been eligible prior to 11/1/17.
That has solved the mystery in my mind.
But I will check it when I get back to my office.
We just spoke prior to the hearing.
Yeah, there's so many laws that change that's hard to keep up with. Thank you. Mr. Anderson, I want to acknowledge that you have said some statements that are very accurate. When you said that the officer fired his weapon at you, and then you fired back, that he had a right to, you were a felon and you had a firearm, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So, that is such a dangerous job, and you were already, had already spent 10 years incarcerated for a manslaughter, and you should not have had a weapon on you, and you acknowledged that, and I appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm a little concerned about your conduct record. When I see someone who's had 13 write-ups, but the problem is they've been more recent and consistent. You said you were working towards rehabilitation. Why don't you address some of those write-ups for me? How did you get them, and what were you thinking? Why am I seeing all these write-ups? 13 write-ups, and some as recent as 2020, 2019, 2016, 15.
We tied up on 9 pounds, adding weight to the ball. And
the 19, it was a 30W.
Okay, 19 was 30W. Well, a friend of mine asked me for he had a head cold. He asked me that I had some sinus pills. I told him, yeah, I'll bring it for him. I grabbed the minister, told the people, walked down into the kitchen, and I gave him that. And what the other one, what year it was?
What's the contraband 2019? What was the contraband?
That was one where they was doing a shakedown of his property in his locker. And he had one large plastic container that wouldn't have been sold in the canteen, and it had some fried chicken in it.
Okay. Okay. Those are no crimes of violence necessarily, so that's a little more palatable for me. What was the circumstance of your first manslaughter? Was it drug related or?
No, ma'am, no, ma'am. It was me being in the club, and I stepped on this guy's feet. I told him, I actually told him I was sorry. And I went on with the girl who I was with. And maybe about 30 to 45 minutes later, she came back with 3 other guys saying, well, there he is right there. And they all jumped on me. And so the bouncer in the club, they stopped us and they pulled us outside the club where the fight continued. And they all crowded me and stuff like that. And a friend of mine helped me get them off of me. And I was able to get a weapon from my friend and commenced to doing what I did, hurting the individual.
Convinced doing what you did, what did you do? So
I mean, when I took the shot at the victim, I killed him. Being under the influence.
okay. I'm gonna defer to my other colleagues as well. Any other questions?
Yeah, how many total years have you been incarcerated?
27. I'm actually doing my 28th year right now.
So you did 10 for the manslaughter charges?
So?
You did 10 years for the manslaughter?
I think it was 7 years and 9 months.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, I don't see any other questions. I think, is the panel prepared to vote? Is this what I do? I am.
Mr. Anderson, I'm sorry, but past actions are a strong predictor of future behavior. Two murders concerns me greatly, especially with the time distance between them. I'm thrilled that you're doing some good work. I appreciate that you're not a terrible problem in the system. And most of all, Ms. Lowy, I commend you significantly for the work that you have done for reentry. An excellent job. I've not met you or heard from you before, and I read over the report. It was very detailed, very, and I hope those same services are available at any point that he gets out. Today, my vote is to deny parole based on past criminal history. Mr. Freeman.
Okay, Mr. Staley, last time I voted to grant you parole. And I'm looking at it and I don't see any more write-ups since then. But now you get out, if you go take those classes, you're gonna get out in a year. And I really think you would benefit from those classes to refresh your memory on what the classes were about. So, today I'm gonna vote to, deny, because I think you'll benefit from those classes and it wouldn't add, I mean, you'll be out within a year.
Mr. Tiller.
My vote is to grant, with the conditions of taking those classes.
Mrs. Stapleton.
My vote is to deny based upon your past violent criminal history, law enforcement opposition, and you do need the class in victim awareness.
Mr. Anderson, today my vote would be to grant after you complete the victims program and any other recommended programs by the warden. However, sir, you've received two votes to grant, 3 votes to deny, so the outcome of today's proceeding is that your parole application has been denied, sir. Good luck to you, sir. Try to get enrolled in that victim class. Whatever class you can. Thank you,
Yeah,
sir.
in all your classes, you'll get out.
Good luck. Board, that concludes our business. We're going to sign off at your facility, 9:55. Thank you so much.
Whatever.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Good morning. Committee on Parole is reconvening. We're now at Louisiana State Penitentiary. Today is Monday, February 3rd, 2025. The time is 10 a.m. Would the staff there at Angola please introduce yourself for the record?
Deputy Warden Ashley Olivo.
Reginald Admiral classification.
Karen Shipley, offender records. Taylor Rackett, classification.
All right, thank you. And let me acknowledge the folks we have who joined us and waiting on my list. I think we have Mr. Kerry Myers with the Parole Project. Oh, I'm sorry. We have Mr. Myers is here in support. In opposition, we have the Assistant District Attorney, Mr. Wilson. We also have representing the victim Terry Kennedy, Dane Kennedy, Susan Frierson, Connie Hoover, and Juanita Godwin. And those who've indicated they'd like to speak, we'll call on them at the appropriate time. Mr. Wise, first, would you introduce yourself, sir? Tell us your name and your DOC number.
Ivan Wise, 87590.
All right, Mr. Wise, you're classified as a first felony offender, currently serving a life sentence for a second-degree murder conviction. You were sentenced in June of 1977. Is that information correct, sir?
Yes, ma'am. That's right.
And you had a parole eligibility date, which was determined to be August 1st, 2017.
Right.
Okay. Mr. Wise, before we get started, would you take a moment to tell us what you did, what led you to prison, and why do you think this panel should vote to grant you parole today?
Well, I was out at the bar in Slidell, met Marcia at the bar. I hadn't seen her in 5 years. I went to school with her in Slidell High. We hitchhiked to my house, to my truck. My boss had it down the road a little ways. We got my truck and went to my house. We got in an argument. I don't know what started it or whatever, but we got in an argument, and next thing I know, she's dead, and I took all the evidence and scattered it around the parish. I told the sheriff about it. I told him everything, and they bonded me out for $25,000. I stayed out 6 or 8 months. And I was arrested in 76 and tried in 76. So it wasn't very long that I was convicted behind that. I'm sorry about the whole thing. I don't understand what happened today. I still don't understand. I know what happened though.
So why do you think we ought to vote to grant you parole?
Well, it's been almost 50 years. I think it's 48 right now. I think 49. I feel like I've done enough time. That's the way I feel. I'm a first offender. I've never been involved with the law in any kind of way. This is the only time.
All right. Well, I tell you what, let's hear from the warden. What can you tell us about Mr. Wise?
Yes, ma'am. He is, as we stated, serving a life sentence for second-degree murder. He lives at our trustee camp, Camp F. He currently works as a tier walker at our death row area. He's had a total of 5 DV reports, with the last one being September of 2002. He has completed victim awareness, inside out decks, thinking for a change, 100 hours, anger management, victim accountability letter training. His tiger risk is low. He hasn't enrolled in any of the vocational programs that we offer. He does have, although in the past, looking at his record, He has worked with the carpentry crew here at Angola in the past, and I did ask him why he got out of that trade per se, and he said he was just ready for a change. That's about all I can say for Mr. Wise today.
Thank you, Ronaldo. We appreciate your input. Mr. Myers, could we hear from the Parole Project, please?
Good morning, Terry Myers with Louisiana Parole Project. Here to let the board know, should this board grant Mr. Wise parole today, Parole Project is prepared to offer Mr. Wise long-term transitional housing and reentry support. I'm also here to answer any questions that the board might have.
Great. Any questions for Mr. Myers? All right, I don't see any at this time, so we'll move on to the opposition. First, we'd like to hear from Ms. Terry Kennedy. All of them, I believe, are with Mr. Wilson. So, Mr. Wilson, if you have a different order, I'll defer to you if you'd like.
No, ma'am. Just if y'all bear with us, we're dealing with a wide angle camera that keeps going in and out. So we're going to have everyone that needs to speak will just step up to this camera that I'm facing right now. Does that work for y'all? If y'all can
Yeah, that
see
works
me?
fine. Yes, that works fine.
Ms. Kennedy, if you just want to come right up here and just look directly into that little circle, I think that should work.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name's Terry Kennedy, and my sister, Marcia Norris, was murdered by Ivan Wise. She was horribly beaten and strangled before she was shot in the chest. Ivan always repeats, which he did not today, but every other time he's repeated that he trussed her up like a deer to carry her. He put my sister in the dirty water of Bayou Bunfuka. He hid her from us for 2 days. It was so horrible not knowing where she was, that the horror of hoping that she was tied up somewhere, held captive and not killed, but we knew because she did not call about her children that night. She had always called. And just the idea of him trying to blame her, he has done that several times, told lies and tried to blame her for that he killed her. My sister was a good mama. She didn't get to raise her sons or to be an aunt to my children. David and Jeremy have suffered because they were not raised by their mother. And this is the picture of my sister with her 2 kids. That's what she looked like right before she died. My heart has been broken every day since April 3rd, 1976. Our lives have never been the same. Her voice, her laugh is never here. Someone, my sister, is always missing. My heart truly aches with the pain of her not being here. Every year I dread April 3rd. I am so aware of the date coming up. Mentally, it affects me, thinking of what she went through that night. Marcia being all alone, being beaten by Ivan, then seeing the gun, helpless. What thoughts were going through her mind? It torments me. I watched Ivan at the trial. He sat there with a smirk on his face. He didn't act like he was sorry for what he had done. He didn't act like he is now. Please don't let him out of prison. My sweet sister is never coming out of the grave. So that's basically what I wanted to say. Please don't let him out.
Terry, I did have one question. How old is your sister?
She was only 23.
23, and how old were the 2 boys at that time?
18 months and 4.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Could we hear from Dane Kennedy, please?
I entered this family 24 years ago. And I've seen and heard the trauma even until today. And we have to relive it every 3 years. I've watched, I've listened, I've read reports. I'm not here to speak to Ivan's case record because obviously it's right there in front of you. The criminal justice system did its job, gave him life, eligibility for parole. But even today, as I watch Ivan Wise has no remorse. He still does not take accountability. The testimonies are there historically, and still today he said before you being a liar. Sociopathy does not go away. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And then we have Susan Frierson.
Good morning. My name is Sue Frierson. The victim, Marsha Norris, was my niece. I was the person who discovered that she was missing. She didn't come home after going out with her girlfriends. And I walked over to her house because I had a book she liked to read. Marsha liked to read. And when I got there, the babysitter said, Marsha didn't come home. I said, what? Why didn't you call somebody? Let us know what. They said, well, we went to sleep and we didn't know. It was like a sledgehammer hit me in the head. I couldn't believe that those kids, they didn't call someone. That was not like Marsha. She didn't go off and leave her babies and not come home to them. And I immediately called her mother. Her mother was at work. And I called her mother. And it was days before her body was found. She had been shot, tossed in the bayou, tied up. This is a sad story. It's something that we live with every day of our lives. As her family, we live with this every day. This man was found guilty by a jury of his peers and sentenced to life in prison. We would like to see him say life in prison. I'm sorry we feel like this, but we miss this person. We miss Marsha. And we're having to live without her. Her boys have lived without her basically all of their lives. Thank you for hearing me. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Frierson. And Mr. Wilson.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, Ms. Renatz and the members of the board. Just at the outset, I want to state that the district attorney and the district attorney's office strongly believes that the members of this board are reasonable and will see the facts as the jurors did. Now, I know that you've reviewed the record in this case to the extent that it's been prepared to you by the parole board. My comments will be brief, but I just want to read something, and this is from the packet that's been provided to you. From the trial facts, in addition to the defensive wounds, the victim had blood clots behind her eyes, which suggested she had been strangled before death. An electrical cord was tied around her neck. Wise shot Marsha as she was laying on the bridge, as evidenced by some bloodstains on the pavement. Finally, he tossed her in the water. Now, I think it's very evident. You can listen to what Mr. Wise is saying, that this was an accident, or his dismissive claim a minute ago to you offensively that, quote, the next thing I knew she was dead. That's not what happened here. You can look at the trial record and you know what happened, the same way as the jurors understood what happened in this case. He wanted something from her that she wasn't prepared to do for him. And when she didn't do it, this is the way he reacted. He savagely beat her, strangled her, then shot her through the heart and threw her body over a bridge. But for an ill-conceived and unjust window in the 1970s parole laws, this defendant wouldn't be before you today to cause further pain for the family of his victim. The district attorney asks you to cure this injustice and keep Ivan Wise exactly where he belongs for the rest of his life. He has already gotten his break. He should have received capital punishment for this abominable crime. Now, I mentioned just a second ago, and I'm going to bring it up again in closing, his own statement, next thing I knew, she was dead. That's the way he sees this. That is not the words of someone you can trust amongst law-abiding citizens. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. We appreciate the input from the DA's office. Mr. Wise, your case has been assigned to Mr. Tillis. Would you answer his questions, please?
Was that the district attorney speaking then?
That was Butch Wilson from the district attorney's office. Would you answer Mr. Tillis' questions, please?
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to say something first.
No, sir. You're going to answer Mr. Tillis's questions.
Okay.
You don't have the opportunity to rebut. Mr. Tillis?
Good morning, Mr. Wise. How are you?
Good morning.
I heard you say at the end of your statement, opening statement, that you knew what happened.
Yes, sir.
I read your case several times, and I'd like to ask just, when you guys left the bar, you were going back to your house?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What caused the fight?
We got in an argument about children. I don't understand what we were arguing about, really. She was separated from her husband. That's what she was doing out that night. They were fixing to get a divorce and all that.
So when you got back to the house, after a while, you got into an argument with her?
Oh, yeah, within 10, 15 minutes, yeah.
It must have been pretty serious.
Yes, sir.
Can you tell me what happened? What caused it?
Well, like I said, we got in an argument about children.
Oh, okay. I have no more questions.
I do.
Yeah, I've got some questions. You've been very flippant when you've described that really you just think you need to get out because it's your time to get out. That's really all this amounts to. You've served enough time, and what you did and how you did it and how brutal the crime is has absolutely, in your mind, nothing to do with it. It has a lot to do with it with me. Because I've read what you did to this lady, and then, she was 23 years old. She had the whole rest of her life. She had 2 little boys, which is why I asked their age, 18 months and 4 years. Chances are the 18-month-old child probably won't have a good memory of his mother. And I'm sure she was a very loving mother. And you never have mentioned in any of this stuff, victim impact. Tell me about victim impact, what you think this did, because you didn't talk about that either.
No, it hurt both their families and friends and my families and friends. It hurt everybody that was involved in the case. I understand that.
That's very descriptive. In victim impact, it's almost, it's not cliche, but you hear it so often without any absolute reference as to what they mean with the ripple effect. But it's also generational obliteration. I mean, for those children, their mother just dissolved that night. She just didn't come home. And then for the family, the ripple effect is, yes, like, she doesn't pick up the phone every day and call her sister and say, hey, I just wanted to check in on you. Those are the kind of like everyday things. Mom, what you cooking today, that they're used to seeing her do. Those are the everyday things that when you talk about the ripple effect, it's also just the daily occurrences that you're used to that person doing. These children were used to a mother's hug and kisses. That when you did what you did in such a heinous way, you stole that from these children. So I didn't hear anything from you other than I need to get out because I've served my time, and there you go. that, I guess what this was a statement, because I really don't have any questions for you, because you haven't answered any questions.
Any other questions? All right, Mr. Wise, I was gonna ask you about, your training and victim awareness also. I don't think I need to do that at this point. Were you under the influence of anything other than alcohol at the time of the murder?
Yes, ma'am.
What was it?
There was some pills, smoked a joint or two.
What kind of,
Mostly drinking though.
what was the pills? You remember the pills?
I can't remember what they were.
Was it, I mean, you know, was it speed?
I think it was. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Okay, so all that mixed together, okay. I think we're prepared to vote. Mr.
Sure.
So,
I wanted to ask one more question.
okay,
Did you take any drug abuse classes? I see you didn't take any while you were there.
Sir?
Did you take any abuse classes, drug abuse classes while you've been incarcerated? Have you?
I don't think so. No. No, sir.
Okay.
all right, I think we're ready to vote. Mr. Tillis.
My vote's gonna be to deny because of, the opposition of the family, DA and, the sheriffs.
I wanted to say something about that district attorney. He
No,
told.
sir, no, sir, no, sir. Mrs. Stapleton?
And I concur with Mr. Tillis, and I would like to add, and also due to the heinous, gruesome nature of the crime.
Mrs. Ledoux?
Denied based on lack of remorse.
Mr. Freeman?
Lack of remorse and family opposition.
And Mr. Wise, I do agree with my colleagues. The last time I saw you at your hearing, I noted, and I told you then, that I was dying because of your lack of understanding of the impact of the crime and how important that is for success in the community, and none of that has changed. So my vote today is to deny, and it has been unanimous, sir. Your application for parole has been denied. That concludes our business there at the penitentiary. We're going to sign off at 10:24.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Excuse me, but I can't hear anything.
All right, good morning. The Committee on Parole is reconvening. We are now at Dixon Correctional Institute. It's 10:35 a.m. on Monday, February 3rd, 2025. Good morning, Warden. Would you and your staff please introduce yourself?
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, Board. Dusty Bickham, Warden.
Lisa Jenkins, classification. Jade Babineau, classification.
Ashley Bradley, records.
Alvin King, reentry. Jamie DeVal, mental health. That's it, ma'am.
Oh, wow. Got the A team today. Good. Thank you. And we have before us Mr. Franklin. Good morning.
Good morning.
Would you introduce yourself? Tell us your name and your DOC number, please.
Yes, ma'am. My name is David Franklin. My DOC number is 359959.
All right. And you are represented by counsel this morning. Good morning, sir. Would you introduce yourself?
Good morning, Robert Lancaster here on representing David Franklin. I'm with the LSU Parole and Reentry Clinic.
Okay, thank you. Here in support is also the Parole Project. We have Mr. Kerry Myers. We also have Mr. Franklin's brother, Lewis Roach, who will be speaking in support. And here in opposition is representing the DA's office in East Baton Rouge Parish is Tracy Barbera, and we'll call on her at the appropriate time. First, Mr. Franklin, I'm going to read some identifying information into the record, sir. You are classified as a first felony offender. You're currently serving a 60-year, 11-month, and 30-day sentence. You were sentenced in East Baton Rouge Parish. First was possession of a gun with obliterated serial numbers, attempted first-degree murder, and then as a habitual offender for attempted first-degree murder. You have a parole eligibility date, which was August 1st, 2021, and your good time release date is November 14, 2058. Is that information correct, Mr. Franklin?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Lancaster, first we'd like to ask your client to give us some background information about why he's in prison and why does he think we should vote favorably, unless you would like to make that presentation?
Ms. Renato, I think Mr. Franklin is prepared to address the committee. It's best that you hear from him.
Okay, great. So, Mr. Franklin, we'd like to hear from you, sir. Tell us what led you to prison, why you're in jail, and why do you think we ought to vote for your parole today?
Oh, yes, ma'am. I would like to first take responsibility for what I've done and would like to let you know that I'm remorseful for what I've done. And I'm in prison for shooting at the police officers. And I would like to show you a David Franklin of 98 and 99 compared to a David Franklin of 2025. I've taken prisoner rehabilitation programs, and I'm for prisoner rehabilitation program. One was Cajun Rage. It was a 12-month program. It deals with the mind and thinking and making decisions. And I made all good decisions. I passed that course, and I got my certificate that I sent for a copy of my record, and it come back no write-up showing that I made good decisions. I'm using this record as my support and evidence. I've taken Living in Balance. That's another 12-month program, 12-week program. It deals with the mind, teaches you how to think and make good decisions. I passed that, and I sent for my record, and he come back again. Good decision making, no write-up. I made another one, Living in Balance, Thinking for a Change. That was a 12-week program. I passed that, and I sent for another copy of my record, no write-up, showing that I had made good decisions. And by my good decision making, I get a chance to go eat with the warden once every 90 days. I get a chance to be trustee for 1 day, twice a year at the art and craft festivals. Warden trusts me to walk around with the free people, laugh and talk with them. They don't worry about me committing no crime, and don't worry about me running off. because over the past 25 years, I have shown to make good decisions. In conclusion, I'm a living example that the prison rehabilitation program do work.
All right. Well, thank you, sir. You've given that some thought. Thank you. Ward Bickham, is there anything you can tell us about Mr. Franklin?
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, board. As usual, I can talk about how he's done in the prison system, and he's done well. He hadn't had a write-up, it looks like, since he's been at DCI. He came to DCI in 2010. But his last write-up, it looked like it was 07 was a low court, maybe 03 or something. I can't remember, but 04 was his last high court write-up. So he has stayed out of trouble, disciplinary trouble for numerous years. He has a couple of jobs. He works as a helps clean the bathrooms, but also in a hobby shop, which is, he led to talking about being a trustee for a day or twice a year at our arts and crafts show. DCI hosts the arts and crafts show, and being that he's a hobby shop orderly, some of that hobby shop is what's sold. We do allow him to be a trustee for those days to kind of be out there and help with that. And he does a good job. He's done some good programs. So that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Lancaster, would you like us to hear from those who are here in support? When would you like to make your presentation?
If it pleases the committee, I can make my presentation prior to your vote.
Okay. We'll hear from Mr. Myers first. Parole Project.
Thank you. Good morning, Kerry Myers with Louisiana Parole Project. And we're here on behalf of David Franklin. We were at David's previous parole hearing. As David explained and his record shows, since he's been at DCI, he's had no disciplinary infractions. He's had the same job for 15 years, which shows his stability. He's trusted by the administration and the staff. We believe David would be an ideal candidate for Parole Project's program. Not only would he have our support, he has the support of his family. David is now in his mid-60s. He has served 25 years of this sentence, and we believe David is no threat to society. We would just ask that this parole board consider these factors today and grant David's parole.
Thank you. Mr. Roach, could we hear from you?
Okay. Am I unmuted now? Can you hear me now?
Can you hear
Okay.
us?
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Well, David is my brother, my younger brother. I mean, and David has always been a hardworking, reliable plumber. He's got skills. He made a mistake. I mean, it's crazy and outlandish as it might have been. I think he's learned his lesson. He's gonna have full support. Okay, he's not gonna have any problems fitting back in. For me, our father, our family, we all want him home. We're all gonna support him. And we talk every Sunday, and from the conversations we have, he's grown a lot. He's grown a lot. And I would appreciate, if he gets consideration for release. He's paid his debt, I think. He's never been a bad person. He made some mistakes like all of us. But I think that shouldn't be a death sentence. But I hope you guys give him another chance. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Roach. Okay, at this time, before we hear from the DA, Mr. Lancaster, we'd like to hear from you.
Or Mr. Hudson, members of the committee. The Law Clinic represented Mr. Franklin when he had his hearing back in November of 2022. And we're here today continuing our representation of him. David's record indicates that the time is right to release him now for a number of reasons. One, as the warden mentioned, is institutional compliance. Throughout his 25 years of incarceration, he only has 7 write-ups. The last in 2007 was a low court write-up. The last B court write-up was 20 years ago, in 2004. He's a pride member here at Dixon, so he's recognized for being an inmate that shows leadership and compliance with the rules. He has a low Tiger score, so the risk assessment used by the Department of Corrections indicates that he's a low risk should he be released. His work ethic in prison demonstrates that he's a hard worker. As the warden mentioned, he does have 2 jobs. He asked David what he does in prison. He said he's the mop. And he's had that job for 15 years, also orderly of the hobby shop. The factors that were in his life in 1998 and 1999, the time of these crimes, where he had a series of really bad decisions, have been addressed. He's, had 100 hours pre-release in 2021, Cage Your Rage in 2022, Victim Impact in 2022, Life of Recovery in 2021. He was denied parole in 2022, and he didn't let that in any way stop his progress. And he's committed himself to additional programming since then, which I think demonstrates his real focus and determination to prepare himself for release, but also to continue to address those issues present in his life at the time the crime occurred. In 2023, he completed Celebrate Recovery and Drug Dealers Anonymous, both programs related to substance abuse, teaching discipline, clear thinking, understanding consequences of action. In 2023, he also had Thinking for a Change, which is a program to address thinking, and that lack of thinking is really what led to his criminal behavior in his life prior to prison. He's also had Living in Balance in 2023, Nurturing Parent in 2023, so a significant amount of programming. As far as employment is concerned, he did receive a DCI Service Recognition Award in 2024, indicating the institution's view of his contributions. Also, OSHA Career Safe Training in 2024 as well. He has significant support now, as Mr. Myers mentioned. The Louisiana Parole Project is prepared to assist him for as long as necessary. He has very strong family support. He can live with his father in Baker, join the family's plumbing business there. And being in East Baton Rouge Parish in Baker, the Parole Project continue to have significant input into his reentry. Also, in addition to being 64, very healthy, capable of work now, he has the ability to gain employment, do work, earn money. He did pay into the Social Security system prior to his incarceration, so in a few years, he'll also be able to qualify for those Social Security benefits. And so he will have a significant support system on his release. So for these reasons, we request that the committee grant his release on parole so he continue to serve his sentence under community supervision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lancaster. Before we start our interview, we'd like to hear from the DA's office, please.
Good morning, Chairman Renata, other members of the board. Thank you for hearing me this morning. I've heard Mr. Lancaster and Mr. Franklin say many, many things that I know weigh very heavily in your decision-making this morning. Institutional compliance is huge. Family support is huge. He has a transition plan. Mr. Myers and the Parole Project do wonderful things. I do need to bring it back, however, to what brought him to the Department of Corrections to begin with. We have a man who was on supervision at the time he committed not this crime, but these crimes. We have two separate dates of incident here, and I would ask that you remember what was going on. In the first incident, he had a problem with a family member, and he told that family member when the police arrived, he would shoot them. If the police arrived, I will shoot them. The police arrived and he did fire at them. He escaped. That was the first incident in December of 1998. In the second incident in May of 1999, imagine these law enforcement officers, what was going on in their mind, how they were putting their life on the line that day. They were going to locate and arrest a man who had an outstanding warrant for attempting to kill a police officer. So they went to that house and went into that bedroom, and Mr. Franklin came within inches of facing multiple counts of first-degree murder. One of the officers, the bullet came just within a couple of inches of his temple and went into the door frame where he was standing. So again, this was not when the crime occurred. This is when the crimes occurred. He's done excellent things in prison, and I admire that. I respect that. However, we still have a man that has served less than 26 years of a 60-year sentence. And I would ask you to please make him serve more of this sentence before he is released back into society. And I'm speaking on behalf of the law enforcement officers. I know each of them did submit a letter into the record, and there's no doubt in my mind that each of you have reviewed their sentiments, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. And we did receive the letters and we have reviewed them. Mr. Franklin, your case has been assigned to Mr. Freeman. Would you answer his questions, please?
Ma'am.
Okay, Mr. Franklin, morning. What was going on that day? I mean, the first day, what led to all of this violence?
Well, somebody said the police were coming, and I made a bad decision to take off and running. I fired some shots as I was running.
Did you tell the people in the house if the officers came, you were gonna shoot them?
I don't remember saying that.
Okay. And tell me this, okay, you was dating Nedra Turner
Yes, sir.
and Priscilla Turner, that's her daughter?
But yes, sir.
Didn't you have charges against you stemming from her at
No,
one
sir.
time?
No, sir.
You didn't offer her $50 for sex, and then y'all got in a fight. And then when the police stopped you, you had two guns.
No, sir.
That's not what the rap sheet says, and it's not what the report says. Okay, you on supervision, you were revoked 2 times for absconding, and you were eventually revoked for this new felony. As was stated, you were on at the time that this offense committed. Were you on drugs?
No, sir.
I mean, I'm just trying to figure out how a man could be in this shootout and all of this, get shot 3 times, still jump through a window. Usually they're either totally drunk or on some good drugs. So you wasn't on any drugs when this happened?
No, sir.
Okay. Well, all right. Have you ever had a history of drugs?
No, sir.
Okay. As they say, you've done excellent in prison. There's no doubt about that. Do I have any other questions? I have no further questions.
All right, thank you. Any other questions?
I'd like to ask about the educational achievement. Have you taken your GED?
I have not taken the actual test for my GED. I've taken the high set test for 3 of the subjects and passed. And I've got 2 left before I get my GED.
So you've got 2 more sections to pass before you complete it.
Yes, ma'am. Science and algebra.
Okay.
So Ms. Ledoux, he did January of this year, actually, he passed writing, social studies, and reading. He failed science by 1 point. He got a 7 and needed 8. So he's correct. in needing science and, the math section.
Thank you.
All right, I don't see any other questions by my colleagues. I think that the panel is prepared to vote. Mr. Freeman?
Okay, Mr. Franklin, you know, you're one of those cases that you've done great in prison and you're doing a great job. But now you gotta serve your time for the crime you committed. And I mean, as Ms. Barbera stated, we're very lucky there wasn't 2 or 3 deputies that were killed. It was very reckless, very crazy, and I mean, and it was intentional. You just wasn't going to jail until they stopped you. So, due to law enforcement opposition and not enough time served, my vote is to deny.
Mr. Tillis?
My vote's gonna be to deny also, not enough time served.
Mrs. Stapleton?
I concur with that, but I would also add that you have lied about previous charges that we had, that you did try to rape a 14-year-old. And that led to an argument, and they found 2 weapons in your vehicle, and it was pled down to indecent behavior with a juvenile, and then it was pled down to possession of a firearm with an obliteration of a serial number. So, and you denied that completely. So I concur with all that, but then I'm gonna add that to it.
Ms. Ledoux?
I concur with Mr. Freeman.
Mr. Franklin, I do agree. I am so pleased to see. I mean, I saw you the last time and we indicated that you needed more programs and you did do more programs since your last hearing. You've done some really good programs, Thinking for Change, Celebrate Recovery, and others that's going to assist you. But I have to say that because of the victim opposition, and I agree with the district attorney's office, it's just at this time insufficient time served on the 60-year sentence. So keep doing what you're doing, Mr. Franklin. We'll hope to see you again as soon as you're eligible. Good luck to you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our business, it's 10:57. We'll sign off. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Franklin, I'm gonna need you to stay in here. I gotta print a paper out.